I thought burying my grandmother would be the hardest part of the week, but 72 hours after the funeral, my mother didn't call to check on me, she sued me. Vivian wasn't just contesting the $6.8 million estate. She was rewriting history to paint me as a thief. Standing in the hallway with the process server, I realized the woman who raised me was prepared to burn my life to the ground for a wire transfer. The fog in Harbor Glen does not roll in like a soft blanket. It sits heavy and wet on your chest, smelling of salt and decaying kelp, pressing the gray sky down until it touches the slate roofs of the Victorian houses lining the cliffs. It was fitting weather for burying my grandmother. Standing at the gravesite, I felt the dampness seeping through my black wool coat. The priest was speaking about eternal rest and charitable spirits, but the air around the small cluster of mourners felt anything but peaceful. It vibrated with a sharp static tension that made the hair on my arms stand up. My mother, Vivian, stood to my left. She was perfect. That was the only word for it. Her black dress was tailored to a terrifying precision. Her blonde hair swept up in a chignon that defied the coastal wind. She was not crying. She was not even looking at the mahogany casket being lowered into the wet earth. She was looking at the flowers, scanning the arrangements as if calculating their cost. To her left stood my Uncle Ronan. He looked like a man trying to shrink inside his own suit. He kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes darting toward the parking lot where the cars were lined up, black beetles on the gravel. Every time I tried to catch his eye, he looked away. Fixing his gaze on a patch of mud near the grave marker, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Mrs. Calloway, Eleanor's neighbor and friend for 40 years. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her knuckles white against my dark sleeve. She did not look at me, keeping her eyes forward, but she squeezed my arm. Once, twice, 3 times. It was not a comfort. It felt like a signal, a warning tapped out in code. I leaned in slightly. "I am glad you are here, Claire," Mrs. Calloway whispered. Her voice was brittle. "Thank you, Mrs. Calloway," I replied softly. She turned to me then, and her eyes were rimmed with red. But the expression within them was not sorrow, it was fear. "Watch yourself," she murmured, so low the wind almost took it. "Just watch yourself." Before I could ask her what she meant, Vivian shifted. She did not turn her head, but her posture stiffened. "Come along, Claire," my mother said, her voice clear and carrying no trace of the grief one expects at a funeral. "We have the appointment at the solicitor within the hour. We should not keep Mr. Harker waiting." She walked away before the first shovel of dirt hit the lid. The offices of Briarstone Legal Group smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Miles Harker had been my grandmother's attorney since before I was born. He sat behind a desk that looked like a fortress, his silver eyebrows drawn together in a permanent scowl of concentration. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. I sat in a leather wingback chair. Vivian sat next to me, her posture erect, her hands folded in her lap. Ronan sat in the corner, looking as though he expected the chair to bite him. Miles cleared his throat and adjusted his spectacles. He did not waste time with pleasantries. He opened the heavy cream folder in front of him. "I will dispense with the formalities of the reading and get straight to the disposition of assets, as Eleanor requested," Miles said. His voice was gravelly. Vivian nodded once, a queen granting permission. "The total value of the estate, including the property on Cliffside Drive, the investment portfolio, and liquid assets, is valued at $6,800,000. Miles announced. I felt a small jolt. I knew Eleanor was comfortable, but $6.8 million was a number I had not prepared for. I worked in data analytics. I made a good salary, but this was generational wealth. Miles continued. Eleanor has named Claire Wood as the sole executor of the estate. The silence that followed was absolute. I froze. I looked at Miles. Sure, I had misheard. Me? Executor? Over her own children? Vivian did not move. She did not gasp. She simply stared at Miles. Furthermore, Miles said, not looking up, the bulk of the estate is left to Claire Wood as the primary beneficiary. He turned a page. To her daughter, Vivian Wood, and her son, Ronan Wood. Eleanor has left specific structured disbursements. These funds are held in a trust and are subject to strict compliance clauses regarding conduct and financial audits. Compliance clauses. The words hung in the air like smoke. That was when the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Vivian stood up. She did not fly out of her chair in a rage. She rose slowly, smoothing the front of her dress. Her face was composed, but her eyes were cold, hard chips of blue ice. "This is ridiculous," Vivian said. Her voice was level, almost bored. Miles looked up over his glasses. "It is a valid legal document. Vivian, it is a document signed by a woman who was confused." Vivian said. She turned to look at me. The look she gave me was not the look of a mother. It was the look a predator gives a rival. "You did this," she said to me. I blinked, stunned. "I did what?" "You turned her against us," Vivian said. She walked over to the window and looked out at the street. "You have been whispering in her ear for years, telling her lies, making her think she could not trust her own children." "That is not true," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I never discussed money with Grandma, ever." Vivian turned back, a sharp smile cutting across her face. "Oh, please, you think I am stupid? You think I do not know how you operate? You play the quiet, dutiful granddaughter, the martyr, and all the while you were counting the days." She looked back at Miles. 6.8 million. I realized then. She was not surprised by the number. She knew the number. She had done the math before we even walked in here. There is no undue influence here. "Vivian," Miles said, his tone warning. Eleanor was of sound mind. "We have the video attestation if you require proof of capacity. I will see the video." Vivian said, "And I will see the medical records, and I will see the previous drafts of the will. Because 6 months ago, she told me everything was split 3 ways. She picked up her purse. This is not over. Miles, not even close." She walked past me without looking at me. Ronan scrambled up from his chair, muttered a quick sorry to the room at large, and hurried after her. The door clicked shut. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I felt sick. My hands were trembling in my lap. "I am sorry." "Claire," Miles said gently. He closed the folder. "Eleanor feared this might happen. Why did she do it?" I asked. "Why make me executor?" "She knew Mom would hate it. Because she trusted you," Miles said. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small velvet pouch and a white envelope. And because she needed someone who would not be bullied, he slid the items across the desk to me. I opened the pouch. Inside was a heavy iron key. It looked old, like a skeleton key for a piece of antique furniture. There was a small tag attached to it with Eleanor's handwriting. "For later." I picked up the envelope. It was sealed. On the front, in the same shaky but determined script, she had written, "Do not open the box until the court makes noise." I looked at Miles. "What does this mean?" "What box?" Miles shook his head. "She did not tell me. She only gave me instructions to hand these to you immediately after the reading. She was very specific. Claire, she said you would know when the time was right. Until the court makes noise." She knew. I whispered. She knew Mom would sue. Miles looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "Your grandmother was a very observant woman. Claire, she saw things people thought they were hiding." 72 hours later. The court made noise. I was at my apartment, trying to make coffee. When the doorbell rang, it was not a friend. It was a process server. A heavy-set man with a clipboard and a look of boredom that told me he ruined people's days for a living. "Claire Wood?" he asked. "Yes, you have been served." He handed me a thick stack of papers and walked away before I could even say a word. I stood in the doorway, the morning sun hitting the bold text on the front page. Vivian Wood versus the estate of Eleanor Wood. I went inside and sat on my kitchen floor, spreading the papers out. It was a contest of the will. Vivian was seeking to remove me as executor immediately. The language was brutal. It claimed I had used manipulation and isolation tactics to coerce a vulnerable senior citizen. It claimed Eleanor lacked the mental capacity to understand the document she was signing, but it was the personal attacks that stung the most. One paragraph detailed how I had supposedly restricted Vivian's access to her mother in the final months. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. Vivian had been in Europe for 3 of those months, and I had begged her to come home when Eleanor got sick. My phone buzzed, then it buzzed again, and again. I picked it up. A text from a friend. Don't look at the Harbor Glen Gazette online. Of course, I looked. The headline was screaming in bold black letters. Local heiress accused of elder abuse in multi-million-dollar will dispute. Below it was a picture of me, taken from my LinkedIn profile. Next to a picture of Eleanor, the article did not name sources, but the quotes were familiar. A source close to the family claims the granddaughter, Claire Wood, 33, systematically cut off the deceased from her children to secure the $6.8 million fortune. Stole her grandmother's money. That was the comment at the top of the section below the article. She looks the type. Quiet ones are always the snakes. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the sofa cushions with a dull thud. I felt a hot, prickling shame climbing up my neck. I had done nothing wrong. I had loved my grandmother. I had spent every Sunday with her for 10 years, not because I wanted her money, but because she was the only person in my family who made me feel seen. And now, the entire town of Harbor Glen thought I was a monster. Going to work the next day was an exercise in humiliation. I worked at Alderline Metrics, a healthcare analytics firm downtown. Usually, the office was a sanctuary of quiet clicking keyboards and hushed conversations about data sets. When I walked in that morning, the silence was different. It was heavy. Susan at the front desk gave me a tight, strained smile. "Good morning." "Claire." "Morning." "Susan," I said, trying to sound normal. I walked to my cubicle, heads turned. I saw people looking, then quickly looking away when I caught them. A group of junior analysts by the coffee machine stopped talking abruptly as I passed. I sat down at my desk and stared at my monitor. I could feel their eyes on my back. They were wondering if it was true. They were doing the math. $6.8 million. My boss, David, walked by. Usually, he would stop and ask about the quarterly projections. Today, he just gave me a quick nod and kept walking, accelerating slightly as he passed my row. I felt isolated in a room full of people. The shame was a physical weight. Pressing down on my shoulders, I wanted to stand up and scream that I did not do it. I wanted to show them the texts where I begged Vivian to visit. I wanted to show them the nights I spent sleeping in the chair next to Eleanor's bed while Vivian was at a spa in the Alps. But I couldn't, because defending myself felt like dignifying the lies, and because part of me was terrified that if I started talking, I would start crying. And I refused to give Vivian that satisfaction. My cell phone rang at noon. It was Miles Harker. I took the call in the stairwell, the concrete echoing with my heavy breathing. "Did you see the filing?" Miles asked. "I saw it." I said, "It is all lies." "Miles." "Every word of it. I know." Miles said, "But that is not what I'm calling about." "Claire, this filing is unusually aggressive." "What do you mean?" "Usually. In these cases, the contesting party files a petition and waits for a hearing. Vivian has filed for an emergency temporary restraining order on the estate assets. She is asking for an immediate freeze on all accounts, specifically the operational accounts for the house and the discretionary funds. So, she wants the money. It is more than that," Miles said. His voice was low. The specific accounts she targeted. She listed account numbers. Claire, partial numbers, but enough to identify them. She shouldn't have those numbers. Those are internal estate accounts that Eleanor kept private. "What are you saying?" "I am saying someone is coaching her, or she knows exactly where to strike to paralyze the estate. This is not just a tantrum. This is a surgical strike." I leaned my head against the cold concrete wall. "Who? Ronan?" Ronan could not find his way out of a paper bag. Miles said dryly, "No, this is someone else. Someone who knows the banking structure." I closed my eyes. "What do I do?" "You sit tight," Miles said. "I am filing a counter motion." But Claire, you need to be careful. If she is moving this fast, she is desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. After work, I drove to Eleanor's house. I told myself I was going there to check the mail and maybe pack up some of her clothes to donate. But really, I was looking for answers. The house sat on a bluff overlooking the ocean. It was a sprawling Victorian with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch that groaned in the wind. It was silent now. The life had gone out of it the moment Eleanor took her last breath. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. The air was stale, smelling of lavender and dust. I walked into the study. This had been Eleanor's command center. She sat at that mahogany desk every morning for 30 years, writing letters, paying bills, and managing her small empire of charities. I sat in her chair. It still creaked the same way. I opened the top drawer. This was where she kept her current files. Donation receipts, utility bills, correspondence. The drawer was empty. I froze. I pulled it all the way out. Nothing. Just a few paper clips and a stray stamp. I checked the other drawers. The bottom drawer, where she kept old tax returns, was full. The middle drawer, office supplies, was untouched. But the top drawer, the active drawer, was cleaned out. I stood up and looked around the room. It felt wrong. On the mantelpiece, there was a rectangular dust outline where a silver picture frame usually sat. It was a photo of Eleanor and my grandfather on their wedding day. Gone. I walked over to the bookshelf. A row of leather-bound journals was tilted, as if someone had pulled a few out and shoved them back in haste. This was not a burglary. A burglar would have taken the silver candlesticks in the dining room or the flat-screen TV in the parlor. This was a search. Someone had been here. Someone had a key. Vivian. My heart hammered in my chest. She had come here, probably before the funeral. And taken what? What was in that drawer that was worth stealing? Receipts? I remembered the key in my pocket. For later. I pulled it out. It was heavy, cool to the touch. I looked around the room. There was no box here that fit this key. I went to the kitchen. Mrs. Calloway was at the back door, peering through the glass. She jumped when she saw me. "Oh, Claire," she said, opening the door. I saw the lights. I wanted to make sure. "Well, with everything going on, Mrs. Calloway," I said, ushering her in. "Did you see anyone here since Grandma died?" Mrs. Calloway hesitated. She wrung her hands in her apron. "I saw Vivian's car 2 days ago, in the evening, 2 days ago, before the lawsuit was filed." "Did she come inside?" "Yes. She was only here for 20 minutes. She came out carrying a tote bag." I gripped the edge of the granite counter. "She stole from the estate." Mrs. Calloway looked down at her shoes. "Claire, there is something you need to know." "What? Your grandmother? In the last few months, she was worried. Worried about her health?" "No." Mrs. Calloway looked up, her eyes wide. She was worried about her history. She told me she had an argument with Vivian, a bad one. I could hear shouting from my garden. What were they shouting about? I couldn't hear the words. But the next day, Eleanor asked me to come over. She looked pale, shaken. She told me she had started recording things. "Recording things? You mean like a diary?" "No." Mrs. Calloway lowered her voice, as if the empty house were listening. "Voice recordings, maybe video." She said she needed proof. "Proof of what?" Mrs. Calloway shook her head. She wouldn't say. But she said something that stuck with me. She said, "I am not afraid of dying, Martha. I am ready to go. But I am afraid of being rewritten." I stared at her, afraid of being rewritten. Vivian's words at the lawyer's office echoed in my head. She was confused. "You turned her against us." Vivian was already holding the pen, trying to write a new version of the truth, a version where Eleanor was senile and I was a villain. But Eleanor had known. I touched the note in my pocket. "Don't open the box until the court makes noise." The court was screaming. "Mrs. Calloway," I said, my voice hardening. "Did she tell you where she kept these recordings?" "No," Mrs. Calloway said, "but she spent a lot of time in the attic those last few weeks. She said she was organizing." I looked up at the ceiling. "The attic. Thank you, Mrs. Calloway," I said. She reached out and squeezed my hand again. Be careful. Claire, your mother has always been good at getting what she wants. I watched Mrs. Calloway walk back across the lawn to her house. The fog was rolling in again, obscuring the view of the sea. I was alone in the big, empty house, but I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt Eleanor. She had left breadcrumbs. She had left a map. I turned off the kitchen lights and walked back to the foyer. I wasn't going to the attic tonight. Not yet. I needed to be smart. Vivian had struck first, and she had struck hard. If I was going to fight back, I couldn't just be angry. I had to be precise. I locked the front door, the heavy bolt sliding home with a reassuring thud. I drove home through the mist, my mind racing. Vivian wanted a war. She thought she was fighting a scared daughter who would crumble at the first sign of legal trouble. She thought she was fighting the quiet girl who always sat in the corner at family dinners. She was wrong. She was fighting Eleanor Wood's executor. And tomorrow, I was going to find out what exactly needed to be executed. I pulled into my driveway and saw a car parked across the street. It was dark, the engine off. As soon as I turned into my spot, the headlights flicked on, and the car pulled away, disappearing down the street. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Paranoid? Maybe. Or maybe Miles was right. Maybe this was bigger than just a greedy daughter. I went inside and double-locked my door. I took the key Eleanor gave me and put it on a chain around my neck. Tucked under my shirt, it rested against my skin. Cold and hard. Let the court make noise. I was ready to listen. The gavel did not bang. In movies, judges always bang gavels, sending a shockwave of finality through the room. In the probate division of the Harbor Glen Superior Court, Judge Holloway simply closed the file folder and looked over his spectacles. The sound of the thick paper slapping shut was final enough. "The court grants the request for temporary safeguards," Judge Holloway said, his voice dry and bored. "Ms. Wood will remain as executor for the time being, pending a full evidentiary hearing. However, given the serious nature of the allegations regarding undue influence and capacity, the estate's assets are frozen with the exception of necessary maintenance costs. Ms. Wood, you are ordered to submit full financial disclosures of your own assets and a detailed accounting of the estate within 14 days. I stood beside Miles Harker, my hands clasped so tightly behind my back that my fingers were numb. It was a victory. Technically, Vivian had wanted me removed immediately. She had wanted a court-appointed administrator to take over, someone she could likely charm or bully. Instead, I was still standing. I was still the executor, but it felt like a trap. "Thank you." "Your Honor," Miles said, across the aisle. Vivian sat next to a man who looked less like a lawyer and more like a shark in a pinstripe suit. This was Arthur Ketter, of Ketter and Wren Law. He whispered something to Vivian, and she nodded, her face a mask of tragic resolve. She wore a charcoal suit today, modest and somber. The very picture of a grieving daughter trying to protect her mother's legacy from a greedy grandchild. As we filed out of the courtroom, Ketter stopped us near the water fountains. "Ms. Wood," he said, smiling with his teeth but not his eyes. "We will be filing a motion for discovery regarding Eleanor Wood's medical history, specifically, the last 18 months. We have reason to believe her cognitive decline was far more advanced than you allowed the family to know." I felt a surge of heat in my chest. "You are going to drag her medical history into the public record?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "She was a private woman. She was a confused woman," Ketter corrected smoothly, "and we intend to prove she did not know what she was signing." Vivian would not look at me. She stared at a spot on the wall just above my head. "Do what you have to do." "Arthur," Miles said, stepping between us, "we will see you at the deposition." We walked away, down the long marble corridor that echoed with the footsteps of people fighting over money, custody, and freedom. "They are going to try to paint her as senile," Miles said quietly as we reached the elevator. "They want to invalidate the will by proving she lacked testamentary capacity. She was sharp as a tack. Miles, you know that. She did the Sunday crossword in pen until the week she died. I know that, Miles said. You know that. But the court does not know that. And Vivian is going to spend a lot of money to make sure the court sees a different version of Eleanor. I went back to work. But my mind was not on healthcare analytics. It was on the woman who had raised me. Vivian claimed she was fighting for fairness. She told anyone who would listen, her bridge club, the neighbors, the readers of the local blog, that she just wanted what was right for the family. But fairness does not cost $10,000 a month. I sat at my desk at Alderline Metrics, surrounded by dual monitors and spreadsheets. And I did what I did best. I looked for patterns. I pulled up the public property records for Vivian's condo in the fashionable district of Silver Bay. It was a sleek, modern unit she had bought 3 years ago. I cross-referenced the recording dates. 2 months ago, just weeks before Eleanor died. The mortgage on Vivian's condo had been paid off in full. $400,000. Gone. Just like that. I frowned. Vivian worked as a consultant for an interior design firm. A job that paid well but not pay off a mortgage in cash well. I logged into my social media accounts. I had muted Vivian years ago to avoid the constant stream of humble bragging. But now I unmuted her. I scrolled back through the last 6 months. There she was at a gala for the Harbor Glen Heritage Fund, wearing a gown I recognized from a designer runway show. Retail price, $5,000. There she was in a photo captioned, "Treating myself," holding a handbag that cost more than my first car. There she was on a weekend trip to Napa, staying at a resort where the nightly rate started at $1,200. Vivian was bleeding money. She was living a life she could not afford. Fueled by what? Credit? Or did she have another source of income she was hiding? The realization hit me cold and hard. She wasn't suing me because she was heartbroken. She wasn't suing me because she thought Eleanor was crazy. She was suing me because she was broke. Or worse, she was in debt to someone who was tired of waiting. The hypocrisy made me want to scream. She was painting me as a thief while she was drowning in designer silk and secret debts. I printed the screenshots. I printed the property records. I put them in a folder labeled Vivian, Financials, my coworker, Sarah. Walked by and paused. You okay? Claire? You look like you want to punch the screen. I am fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just a bad data set. Sarah hesitated. Hey, I saw the blog post, the one about the lawsuit. I just want you to know. Nobody here believes it. You're the most honest person I know. Thank you. Sarah, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. She walked away, and I looked back at the folder. Honest. Yes, I was honest. But Eleanor had not been just honest. She had been smart. Don't open the box until the court makes noise. The court had made noise. Ketter had threatened the medical records. It was time. Marlowe and Finch Bank was a fortress of limestone and brass in the center of the financial district. It was the kind of bank that didn't have lollipops for kids or dog biscuits at the teller window. It smelled of cold air conditioning and old money. I signed the visitation log at the front desk. My hand shook as I wrote my name. Access to safe deposit box 412. I said to the clerk. She checked my ID and the executor paperwork Miles had provided. Everything appears to be in order. Ms. Wood. She led me down a flight of marble stairs into the vault. The door was a massive circle of steel, polished to a mirror shine. Inside, the walls were lined with rows of metal drawers. The clerk used her master key, and then I inserted the heavy iron key Eleanor had left me. The lock clicked, a sound that seemed to echo in the silence. I pulled the long metal box out. I will give you some privacy, the clerk said, showing me to a small viewing room with a table and a single chair. I closed the door and sat down. The box was cold under my hands. I took a deep breath and flipped the lid open. I don't know what I expected. Gold bars? Diamonds? A confession written in blood? The box was mostly empty. In the center lay 3 things. First, a slim silver flash drive. Second, a white envelope sealed with red wax, marked in Eleanor's handwriting. If Vivian goes to court. Third, a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper. I picked up the paper first. It was a list of bank account numbers. I recognized the first two as her main checking and savings accounts, but there was a third number, longer than the others, written at the bottom. It was circled in red ink. The circle was drawn heavily, the pen digging into the paper. I set the list aside and picked up the envelope. I hesitated. This felt like the point of no return. Once I opened this, I couldn't unknow whatever Eleanor had to say. I broke the wax seal. Inside was a single typed letter, notarized 6 months ago. My dearest Claire, if you are reading this, then my fears have been realized, and your mother has chosen to contest my final wishes. I am sorry to burden you with this fight. I tried to prevent it, but greed is a powerful motivator, and shame is even stronger. I have amended my will not out of confusion, as they will likely claim, but out of clarity. Over the past year, I have discovered repeated financial boundary violations, checks signed with a hand that was not mine, withdrawals made from accounts I rarely touch. When I confronted the family member responsible, I was met not with apology, but with pressure tactics. I was told that I was forgetting things. I was told that I had approved these transfers. I did not. I am leaving you the estate because you are the only one who never asked me for a penny. You are the only one who came to see me when I had nothing to give but tea and conversation. Trust your instincts, Claire, and trust the video. Love, Grandma. She didn't name Vivian. She said family member responsible, but we both knew. I picked up the flash drive. I needed to see it. I left the bank, clutching the items in my purse like they were radioactive. Back at my apartment, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. A single file appeared, statement_01.mp4. I clicked play. The video player opened. The image was grainy, shot from a stationary camera, maybe a webcam or a small security camera hidden on a shelf. It showed Eleanor's study. She was sitting at her desk, wearing her favorite blue cardigan. She looked directly at the lens. Her eyes were clear. Her jaw was set. "This is Eleanor Wood," she said. Her voice was steady, the voice I knew so well. "Today is October 14th. The time is 10 in the morning. She glanced at a newspaper on her desk, then held it up to the camera to show the date. "I am recording this for clarity," she continued. "I am of sound mind. I am not under duress. I am making this record because I have been encouraged to make decisions about my estate that I do not agree with." She paused, looking off camera for a second, as if listening for a noise in the hallway. "I want to state for the record that I intend to change my executor. I cannot trust the people I once trusted." She leaned in closer to the camera. "Whatever they say later, do not believe them. I know exactly what is happening to my money." The video cut to black. It was only 40 seconds long. It felt like a trailer, a teaser for a horror movie. I cannot trust the people I once trusted. She was terrified. I could see it in the tightness of her mouth. She was living in that big house, surrounded by family who were gaslighting her, stealing from her, and telling her she was crazy. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking again. They were going to argue she was paranoid, that the video itself was proof of her delusion. Look, she's filming herself. She thinks people are stealing from her, but the loan payoff, the empty drawer, the missing donation receipts, it wasn't paranoia if they were actually out to get you. I needed to talk to someone who was there, someone who wasn't Vivian. I called my uncle Ronan. Ronan was the younger sibling, the baby of the family. He had always been soft, a man who drifted from job to job, always supported by Eleanor or Vivian. He was currently working as a consultant, which I suspected meant he sat in coffee shops and thought about writing a novel. I met him at a diner on the edge of town. He looked terrible. His skin was sallow, and he had dark circles under his eyes. "Claire," he said, sliding into the booth. "I shouldn't be here. Vivian said we shouldn't talk to you without the lawyers. Vivian isn't here." "Ronan," I said gently, "I just want to understand. Uncle Ronan, why is she doing this? The medical records? It's cruel." Ronan looked down at his coffee. "She's upset. Claire, Mom wasn't herself at the end. She was herself." I said, "She was just angry." "Angry?" Ronan laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "She was confused. She forgot things, Like what? Like bills. Appointments. I leaned forward. Did she forget banking transfers? Ronan flinched. His coffee cup clattered against the saucer. What do you mean? I mean, did she forget to sign checks? Or did someone else sign them for her? Ronan's eyes darted around the diner. I don't know what you're talking about. I stayed out of the money stuff. You know me. I'm not good with numbers. Then how did you know about the Tuesday deadline? Ronan froze. What? At the funeral. I lied. You told Mrs. Calloway that Mom missed the Tuesday wire deadline. I hadn't heard him say that. I was bluffing. Ronan's face went pale. I didn't say that. I just meant she always went to the bank on Tuesdays to meet with the manager. She didn't. I said, my heart pounding. Grandma went to the bank on Fridays. She had a standing hair appointment on Tuesdays. Ronan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked trapped. Someone told me, he stammered. Vivian told me. She was handling the accounts. She said Mom was messing up the Tuesday wires. Wires to who? Ronan? He stood up, throwing a $20 bill on the table. I have to go. I can't do this. Vivian is going to kill me. He rushed out of the diner, nearly tripping over a waitress. I sat there, watching him go. Vivian was handling the accounts. Tuesday wires. Eleanor didn't wire money. She wrote checks. She paid bills by mail. If there were wires happening on Tuesdays. They weren't for the electric bill. I pulled out the list from the safe deposit box. The account circled in red. I needed to find out what that account was. 2 days later, Vivian requested mediation. Miles was skeptical. Usually, they scorch the earth first, then mediate when the money runs out. He said, she is moving fast. We met in the conference room at Ketter and Wren. The table was long and polished, reflecting the fluorescent lights. Vivian sat at the far end, looking diminished. She had abandoned the sharp suits for a soft, pastel cardigan. She looked like a wounded bird. Claire, she said, her voice trembling. Can we just talk? Mother to daughter? I looked at Miles. He gave a slight nod. I am listening. I said. Vivian took a tissue from her sleeve and dabbed at dry eyes. I don't want to fight you. This is killing me. Seeing our family torn apart like this, it's not what Eleanor would have wanted. She wanted me to be executor. Mom, I said quietly. She was sick, Vivian insisted, her voice gaining a sudden, sharp edge. She didn't know what she was doing. Claire, look at yourself. You're a data analyst. You don't know how to manage an estate like this. The complexities, the liabilities. I am learning. I said. Vivian leaned forward. Her eyes locked onto mine. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold intensity. Drop the executorship, she said. Let us appoint a neutral third party. We can split the assets fairly. You keep the house. I just want the liquid assets managed properly. Why the liquid assets? I asked. Because there are obligations, Vivian snapped. Then she caught herself. There are complexities you don't understand. I understand that you paid off your mortgage 2 months ago. I said. Vivian recoiled, as if I had slapped her. Ketter, her lawyer, looked up from his notepad. Surprised. That is irrelevant, Ketter said. Is it? I asked. You claim she's fighting for fairness? I think she's fighting for cash flow. Vivian stood up. She walked around the table until she was standing right next to me. Miles tensed, ready to intervene. Vivian leaned down, her lips inches from my ear. The lawyers couldn't hear her. You think you're smart, she whispered, but you are playing with things that will burn you. If you make me do this publicly, if you make me drag everything out into the light, you will regret it. I turned to look at her. Is that a threat? It's a promise, she hissed. You don't know who you are dealing with. She straightened up and looked at the lawyers, her face crumpling back into grief. I can't do this today. She's so hostile. She stormed out of the room. Ketter gathered his papers, looking annoyed. We are done here, he said. I sat there, my heart racing. You don't know who you are dealing with. She wasn't talking about herself. I needed to understand the money, the wires, the complexities. I went through Eleanor's old address book, a physical book, leather-bound. filled with decades of contacts. I found a name, Nia Serrano. Beside it, Eleanor had written, Honest. Nia. Serrano had been Eleanor's financial advisor for 15 years before she retired. I found her living in a small, tidy bungalow on the north side of town. She was hesitant to talk to me at first. I signed a non-disclosure agreement. She said, standing at her screen door, Please. I said, Vivian is suing me. She's trying to say Grandma was incompetent. Nia's expression softened. Incompetent? Eleanor? That woman could calculate compound interest in her head faster than I could do it on a calculator. She let me in. We sat in her living room, surrounded by potted ferns. Why did you stop working for her? I asked. I didn't stop, Nia said. I was pushed out. About 18 months ago. Vivian took over. She said they wanted to consolidate the management under a new firm. Ketter and Wren? No. Nia said, Ketter is a lawyer. The money was moved to a private wealth management firm. But that wasn't the start of it. What was the start? The donation. Nia said, Eleanor was a generous donor to the Harbor Glen Heritage Fund. You know it? Vivian is on the board. I said, Right. Well, Eleanor made a recurring donation, $50,000 a year. But 2 years ago, she called me in a panic. She had seen the Heritage Fund's annual report. Her name wasn't listed in the Diamond Circle donors. Maybe they made a mistake, I suggested. That's what I thought, Nia said. So we dug into it. The money had left Eleanor's account, but the Heritage Fund claimed they never received it. Where did it go? Nia looked at me grimly. That's the million-dollar question. Or rather, the $50,000 question. When we tried to trace it. Vivian stepped in. She said she would handle it. She said it was a clerical error. A week later, I was fired. I felt a chill. The missing ledger in the study. The empty drawer. Did Eleanor ever find out where the money went? Nia shook her head. I don't know. But I know she started keeping her own records after that. She told me, Nia, I'm going to catch them. I'm going to write it all down. I'm going to catch them. Thank you. Nia, I said. As I left, she called out to me. Claire, check the restricted funds. If money is moving, it's usually hiding in the restricted funds. I drove home as the sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the road. I had the pieces. Vivian was living above her means. She had taken control of Eleanor's finances 18 months ago. Money intended for the Heritage Fund had vanished. Vivian was terrified of the public record, and Eleanor had recorded a video mentioning pressure tactics. I sat at my kitchen table. The lawsuit was a smokescreen. Vivian didn't just want the inheritance. She needed to control the executor because the executor controlled the history. If I dug too deep into the past 2 years of accounts, I would find the missing donation. I would find the wires. I looked at the flash drive. I could release the video. I could send it to Miles. Have him file it with the court tomorrow. It would destroy Vivian's capacity argument. It would humiliate her. But Eleanor's note said, Trust your instincts. Vivian had said, You don't know who you are dealing with. If I release the video now, Vivian would explode. She would fight harder, dirtier. And if there were other people involved, people powerful enough to scare Vivian, they would go underground. I needed more. I needed the full picture. I needed to know who the family member was working with. Because a $50,000 theft doesn't vanish without help on the receiving end. I opened a new spreadsheet. I labeled it Timeline of Events. October 14th. Eleanor records video. November, Nia Serrano fired. December, Vivian pays off mortgage. January. The Tuesday wires begin. I wasn't going to smear my mother. Not yet. I was going to let her think she was winning. I was going to let her think I was overwhelmed. Scared and incompetent, I would play the part of the grieving, confused daughter, and while she was busy performing for the court, I was going to follow the money. I picked up the list from the safe deposit box. The account circled in red. I typed the number into a search bar, hoping for a routing number match. It traced back to a private holding bank in the Caymans. I stared at the screen. Eleanor Wood, the woman who bought her clothes at department stores and clipped coupons, had an account in the Caymans? No, she didn't. but someone using her name did. I closed the laptop. The game had just changed. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was a crime. I turned off the lights. But I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the wind rattle the windows, wondering if the car was parked across the street again, wondering if Vivian was sleeping, or if she was staring at the ceiling, terrified of the daughter she had underestimated. She should be. The conference room at Briarstone Legal Group was windowless, air-conditioned to a meat locker chill, and smelled faintly of burnt coffee. A videographer sat in the corner, adjusting the tripod of a camera that would record every blink, every hesitation, every bead of sweat. Depositions are not like court scenes in movies. There is no judge. There is no jury. There is just a court reporter typing silently on a steno machine and a lawyer across the table trying to flay you alive with polite questions. Vivian was up first. She sat opposite Miles Harker, her hands folded on the polished mahogany table. She wore a soft beige suit that made her look approachable, maternal, and deeply aggrieved. She did not look at me. Miles adjusted his glasses. Ms. Wood, can you describe your mother's mental state in the final year of her life? Vivian nodded slowly, a practiced gesture of sorrow. Mother was confused. She was often isolated. She would call me and forget what she wanted to say. She was easily overwhelmed by details. Can you be more specific? Miles asked. She was isolated and confused. Vivian repeated. Her tone did not change. Her inflection did not change. It was identical to the way she had said it a moment before. She became susceptible to the influence of those who were around her constantly. She lost her ability to distinguish her own desires from the desires of others. I watched her, fascinated and horrified. I had seen my mother lie before. Small social lies, exaggerations about my father's career or her own importance in the community. But this was different. This was a script. Miles paused. He looked down at his legal pad, then back up at Vivian. Ms. Wood, you have used the phrase isolated and confused 4 times in the last 20 minutes. You have also used the phrase susceptible to influence 3 times. Vivian blinked. I am simply describing the situation. It is very precise language. Miles said, Did you prepare these answers with your counsel? I prepared myself to tell the truth, Vivian said, her voice turning icy. Arthur Ketter, her attorney, leaned forward. Objection. Asked and answered. Miles ignored him. Who told you to say she was susceptible to influence? Vivian? Was it a doctor? A neurologist? Or was it someone else? Vivian's eyes flickered toward Ketter for a fraction of a second. It was my observation as a daughter. A daughter who was in Europe for 3 months of that year? Miles asked. I was in constant contact. Vivian snapped. Unlike some people, I did not need to be physically present to exert control. She stopped. The room went silent. She had slipped. Miles smiled. A very small, very cold smile. No further questions on that point. My turn came after lunch. The sandwich I had forced down felt like a stone in my stomach. I sat in the chair Vivian had vacated. The leather was still warm. Arthur Ketter sat across from me. He did not look like a shark today. He looked like a bored bureaucrat, which was infinitely more terrifying. He shuffled a stack of papers. My bank statements, my emails, my life. Ms. Wood, Ketter began. Let us talk about your finances. You work as a data analyst. Is that correct? Yes. And your salary is comfortable? It is sufficient. But not $6.8 million sufficient, is it? I looked him in the eye. No. Ketter smiled. You spent every Sunday with Eleanor Wood. You drove her to appointments. You managed her household maintenance. You were intimately involved in her life. I was her granddaughter. Ketter leaned in. Did you ever discuss the estate with her? No. Never? In 10 years. The topic of money never came up? She would ask me if I had enough for rent. I would say yes. That was the extent of it. Ketter laughed. A dry, rasping sound. You expect us to believe that a woman with a multi-million-dollar estate never discussed the future of that estate with her primary caretaker? Come now, Ms. Wood, you are under oath. I am telling the truth, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling under the table. We talked about books. We talked about the garden. We talked about her past. We did not talk about her will. You isolated her, Ketter stated. You created a dependency. You made sure that when she looked around, the only face she saw was yours. And then you handed her a pen. That is a lie, I said. Is it? Ketter flipped a page. We have testimony that you restricted access to her, that you screened her calls. From whom? I asked. From Vivian? My mother didn't call for weeks at a time. If I screened anything, it was spam calls. Ketter stared at me. He was trying to break me. He wanted me to scream, to cry, to look unstable. He wanted a clip he could play for a judge to show that I was emotional and erratic. I took a deep breath. My grandmother was the strongest person I knew. No one forced her to do anything, if she cut people out of her will. It wasn't because I asked her to. It was because she saw who they really were. Ketter's eyes narrowed. We will see about that. The deposition left me drained, but the adrenaline was still pumping. I couldn't go home. The apartment felt too small, too quiet. I went to the office, logged in, and stared at the spreadsheet I had created, the red circle account. I had traced the routing number to a Cayman holding bank, but that was a dead end without a subpoena. However, the account number itself, the structure of it, looked familiar. I pulled up Eleanor's old charitable giving files, the ones I had managed to salvage from the bottom drawer before Vivian cleared the house. Eleanor donated to dozens of causes: the library, the animal shelter, the historical society. I cross-referenced the account string, and there it was. Not a direct match, but a pattern. The prefix on the Cayman account matched the prefix on a series of transfers Eleanor had made 5 years ago to a donor-advised fund. A donor-advised fund, or DAF, is a charitable savings account. You put money in, get an immediate tax deduction, and then recommend grants to charities over time. It is also an excellent way to move large sums of money quietly, because once the money is in the fund, the specific destination of the grants can be harder to trace publicly. The fund manager listed on the old paperwork was a firm called Apex Philanthropy. I searched my email for Apex. Nothing. I searched Eleanor's physical files again. Nothing. The ledger. I remembered the missing items from Eleanor's study. The top drawer. That was where she kept her current donation logs. If she had a DAF with Apex, the statements would have been in that drawer. Vivian, or whoever cleaned out the desk, had taken them. Why hide a charitable fund? Unless the money wasn't going to charity, or unless the charity it was going to was the problem. I looked at the list of grants from the old DAF paperwork. Harbor Glen Heritage Fund, the same nonprofit Vivian sat on the board of. The same nonprofit Nia Serrano said had lost a $50,000 donation. The circle was closing. Eleanor wasn't just funding the Heritage Fund. She was using a vehicle that obscured the transaction details, and someone had removed the records that showed the flow of money. I needed fresh air. I drove to the cliffside, to Eleanor's house. I knew I shouldn't go inside. It felt like a crime scene now, but I parked on the street and walked to the garden gate. Mrs. Calloway was there, deadheading her roses. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and gardening gloves that looked like they had seen 3 wars. "Claire," she said, straightening up, "you look tired." "I am tired. Mrs. Calloway, they deposed me today." She made a sympathetic noise. "Vultures. All of them." I leaned against the fence. "Mrs. Calloway, do you remember when you told me about the argument? The one you heard between Mom and Grandma?" "I remember." She said, "You said Grandma looked shaken afterward, white as paper." Mrs. Calloway said. She was trembling. I had to make her a hot brandy. She sat at her kitchen table and just stared at the wall. "Did she say anything?" She said, "I didn't think they would go this far." "They?" I asked. "Plural?" Mrs. Calloway paused, thinking. She said yes. And then later that afternoon, she called me back over. She had a package on the table. A thick manila envelope. She had melted red wax on the seal. The envelope in the safe deposit box. She asked me to sign across the seal. Mrs. Calloway said, "As a witness," she said, "Martha, I need you to witness that this is sealed. Don't ask what is inside. Just witness that I am the one closing it." I nodded. "I found that envelope." "Good," Mrs. Calloway said. She was terrified. "Claire, not a physical harm, maybe, but she felt invaded. She told me, 'They are trying to sign my name.'" My stomach dropped. "Sign my name." "Mrs. Calloway." I said, "Thank you." She reached over the fence and patted my cheek with a gloved hand. "You fight them, dear." Eleanor was a tough old bird. She didn't raise a pigeon. The next morning, I put on my most professional blazer and drove to the Harbor Glen Heritage Fund. The offices were located in a renovated historic building downtown. Exposed brick, glass walls, tasteful art that cost more than my car. It screamed prestige. I walked to the reception desk. A young woman with a headset looked up. "Can I help you?" "Hi," I said, smiling brightly. "I am Claire Wood, Eleanor Wood's granddaughter. I'm sorting through some of her estate paperwork and I found a few pledge cards for the fund. I wanted to drop them off and just see the good work she was supporting." The receptionist's smile faltered. "Oh, Ms. Wood." She glanced at the phone on her desk. "We were so sorry to hear about her passing," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "She was a pillar of the community. Thank you. Is the director in? Or maybe someone from development?" "Actually," the receptionist said, her eyes darting to a closed door down the hall. "Everyone is in a strategy meeting right now." At that moment, the front door opened and a man walked out. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost a fortune. He wasn't an employee. I recognized him from the elevator at Briarstone Legal. It was an associate from Ketter and Wren, Vivian's law firm. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes widened slightly. Then he recovered. "Ms. Wood." I didn't catch his name. I just nodded. Small world. He didn't smile. He walked past me and out the door. I turned back to the receptionist. She looked like she wanted to crawl under her desk. "Is Mr. Ketter's firm a donor?" I asked innocently. The receptionist flushed. "Mr. Ketter he advises the board on legal matters." I looked down the hall, through the glass wall of a conference room. I saw people sitting around a table. I saw a whiteboard. I saw a filing cabinet in the corner. It was metal, industrial, and jarring in the sleek office. It had a large label taped to it. "Archive. Restricted." Vivian wasn't in the room, but the man at the head of the table looked up. He was older, silver-haired, with the kind of tan you get from spending winters on a yacht. He saw me looking. He stood up and walked to the blinds, snapping them shut. I turned back to the receptionist. "I will just leave these here," I said. Placing the dummy pledge cards I had forged on the counter, I walked out. My heart was hammering. Vivian's lawyer was advising the charity she sat on the board of, the charity my grandmother had accused of stealing money, the charity that had a restricted archive and a panic-stricken receptionist. This wasn't just embezzlement, this was a laundromat. When I got home, there was a letter from the bank, not Marlowe and Finch. This was from a smaller regional bank where Eleanor kept a rarely used savings account. It was a notice of compliance review. I ripped it open. "Dear Executor, per your request for a full historical audit, we are flagging a transaction attempt dated June 12th of last year. Attempted wire transfer, $200,000. Recipient, Apex Philanthropy, /HG, Heritage. Status, declined due to security verification failure. Notes, the transaction was initiated via online banking. However, the IP address associated with the login was not recognized. Furthermore, the user attempted to bypass the two-factor authentication using the forgot password protocol. The security questions were answered correctly, but the final voice verification failed. Access method, assisted access/proxy. I stared at the paper. June 12th, 4 months before Eleanor died. Someone had tried to wire $200,000 out of her account to the Heritage Fund. They had the passwords. They knew the answers to the security questions. mother's maiden name, first pet, high school mascot, but they failed the voice verification. The user attempted to bypass. This wasn't Eleanor. Eleanor didn't use online banking for wires. She went to the branch. Someone had tried to rob her from behind a computer screen. Assisted access. I looked at the IP address listed in the footnote. I didn't recognize it, but I knew I could trace it. I was holding proof of attempted grand larceny. My phone rang. It was Miles. "Claire," he said, his voice tight. "We just got a call from Ketter. What does he want?" "He wants to settle." I nearly dropped the phone. "Settle? We haven't even finished discovery." "I know." Miles sounded suspicious. "It is a strange offer. Claire, Vivian is willing to drop the contest of the will. She will withdraw the lawsuit entirely. What is the catch? She wants a family restructuring agreement, essentially. She wants you to step down as executor voluntarily. We would appoint a neutral third party, a corporate trustee selected by mutual agreement. You keep the money. Claire, she isn't asking for a larger share of the inheritance. She just wants you off the controls." I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "She doesn't care about the $6.8 million. I said. "She cares about the paperwork." "Exactly," Miles said. "If you step down, you lose the legal right to audit the past accounts. The corporate trustee would only look forward, not backward. They wouldn't dig into the flagged wires. They wouldn't care about the missing ledgers." She is terrified. "Miles, I think you're right," Miles said. "So, what do you want to do? It is a guaranteed win. You keep the inheritance. The legal fees stop. You can walk away." I looked at the bank notice on my desk. Attempted wire transfer. $200,000. If I walked away, whoever tried to steal that money would get away with it. Vivian would get away with it. And the suited man I had seen at the Heritage Fund would get away with it. "Tell them no." I said. "Claire, tell them no. Miles, I am the executor, and I am not stepping down until I know where every single cent went." I hung up and went to my laptop. I needed to see the rest of the video. I plugged in the flash drive. I opened the file. I fast-forwarded past the intro I had already seen. Eleanor's face filled the screen. She looked tired, but her eyes were flinty. "I have installed this camera," she said, gesturing to the lens, "because yesterday I was told to sign a document I did not understand." She took a sip of water. Vivian brought a man to the house. She introduced him as a consultant for the Heritage Fund. They told me that the fund was in trouble. Temporary liquidity issues. They said they needed a bridge loan. Eleanor leaned forward. They put a paper in front of me. It wasn't a loan agreement. It was a power of attorney. Limited. They said, "Just for this transaction." She shook her head. I refused. I told them to leave. Vivian got very angry. She told me I was being selfish. She said, "Do you want everyone to know? Do you want everyone to know?" "Know what? What leverage did they have on her?" Eleanor continued. "I am recording this because I am afraid they will try again. I am afraid they will try to do it when I am not alert, or they will try to do it without me." The timestamp on the video was June 11th, one day before the failed wire transfer. They tried to force her to sign a power of attorney. She refused. So the next day, they tried to hack her account and move the money themselves. And Vivian was in the room. Vivian brought the man. I paused the video. My stomach was churning. This wasn't just financial abuse. This was conspiracy. Vivian wasn't just a greedy daughter. She was an accomplice to a corporate shakedown of her own mother. And the line, "Do you want everyone to know?" Know what? What secret was Eleanor hiding that Vivian thought she could use as blackmail? I looked at the screen. Eleanor's face was frozen in a pixelated expression of defiance. I could take this to the police. I could take this to the judge. But if I did, it would blow up. The Heritage Fund would circle the wagons. They would claim the video was a fabrication, or that Eleanor was paranoid. They would destroy Eleanor's reputation to save their own. Vivian would be the sacrificial lamb. But the people behind her, the consultant, the board members, would vanish into the woodwork. I couldn't just drop the bomb. I had to place it. I needed to know who the man was. I needed to know what the secret was. I closed the laptop. I wasn't going to settle. I wasn't going to step down. I was going to let Vivian think she still had a chance. I was going to let her panic. Because when people panic, they make mistakes. I picked up the bank notice and the video drive. I put them in my own safe, a heavy fireproof box bolted to the floor of my closet. The court battle was about to get ugly. Vivian thought she was fighting for money. She didn't realize she was fighting for her freedom. I checked my phone. A text from Miles. Ketter is asking for a response. He says the offer expires in 24 hours. I typed back, the answer is no. See you in court. I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling. The silence of the apartment felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. Outside, the fog was rolling in off the harbor, thick and white, hiding everything. But the fog eventually lifts, and when it did, I was going to make sure everyone saw exactly what was rotting on the beach. The legal filing arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by the same board process server who was becoming a regular fixture in my life. He didn't even check my ID this time. He just thrust the thick envelope at me and walked back to his van, leaving me standing in the drizzling rain. I took the papers inside and sat at my kitchen table, pushing aside a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal, motion for immediate removal of executor. I scanned the legalese. It was a masterpiece of projection. Vivian's attorneys were arguing that my behavior was hostile, erratic, and driven by a conflict of interest. They claimed I was using the estate's resources to wage a personal vendetta against my mother. They cited my refusal to settle as proof that I was not acting in the best interest of the beneficiaries. I was the one being sued. I was the one having my grandmother's medical records subpoenaed. I was the one whose reputation was being shredded on local blogs. Yet, in the twisted logic of Ketter and Wren law, I was the aggressor. I felt a cold knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. This wasn't just a legal maneuver. This was desperation. Vivian was trying to cut off my head before I could look at the rest of the body. She needed me out of the executor role, and she needed it to happen yesterday. My phone buzzed. It was Miles Harker. "I assume you received the package," Miles said, his voice grim. "I am reading it now." I said, "Hostility? Really? It is a standard tactic. Claire, they are throwing mud at the wall to see what sticks, but the timing is significant. They are pushing for an emergency hearing this Friday." Friday? That is 3 days away. They are claiming irreparable harm to the estate if you remain in control for another week. Miles explained. They are panicking. Claire, the refusal to settle rattled them. They know you are looking at the wires. Let them panic. I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Be careful, Miles warned. A panicked animal bites. That evening, I came home from work to find another envelope. This one wasn't delivered by a process server. It was tucked halfway under my doormat, the corner damp from the fog. It was a plain manila envelope, cheap and unmarked, no stamp, no return address, just my name, Claire, scrawled in blue ballpoint pen. The handwriting was jagged, unfamiliar. I locked my door and carried it to the kitchen counter. I put on a pair of latex gloves from my cleaning supplies. Paranoid. Maybe, but I was past the point of caring about looking normal. I slit the envelope open. Inside were 3 photocopied pages. They looked like pages from a ledger. An old-fashioned, handwritten accounting log. The columns were neat, the numbers precise, the headers were cut off, but the dates were from 2 years ago. One entry was highlighted in yellow. October 14th, Gala Pledge, the Henderson Trust, $50,000. Next to it, in the received column, was a check mark, but below it, in a different handwriting, was a note. See Ajay, entry 11/02. I flipped to the next page. November 2. Internal transfer. Cover shortfall, $50,000. And stapled to the back of the ledger pages was a sticky note. The same jagged handwriting from the envelope front wrote 4 words. Ask about the Gala Pledge. I stared at the papers. The Henderson Trust. I knew that name. The Hendersons were old money in Harbor Glen. the kind of family that had a wing of the hospital named after them. If they made a pledge, they paid it. So why was there a shortfall? And why was there an internal transfer to cover it? I looked at the date again. October. The Harbor Glen Heritage Fund held their annual autumn gala in October. I grabbed my laptop and searched for the Heritage Fund's annual report from 2 years ago. I scrolled down to the donor list. Diamond Circle, $50,000 plus. The Henderson Trust. They were listed, so the money was there. Or at least, the public was told the money was there. I looked back at the ledger, cover shortfall. Someone had cooked the books. They had listed a donation that hadn't come in, or had come in and gone somewhere else, and then moved money internally to hide the gap. I put the pages back in the envelope. I knew who could explain this. Nia Serrano looked at the photocopies on her coffee table and let out a long, heavy sigh. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Where did you get these, Claire?" she asked. "Someone left them at my door." I said, "Does it matter?" Nia put her glasses back on. "No, I suppose it doesn't." She tapped the highlighted line, "The Gala Pledge." She said softly, "That was the beginning of the end for me. Tell me, Nia, please." Nia looked at the window, checking the street, then turned back to me. "The Heritage Fund. It is not just a charity. Claire, it is a social climbing ladder. The board members are judged by how much money they bring in. It is competitive, viciously so. And Vivian is on the board." I said, "Vivian is the chair of the fundraising committee." Nia corrected. 2 years ago. She was up for re-election. She needed a record-breaking year. She secured a massive pledge from the Henderson Trust, $50,000. She announced it at the gala. There was applause. Champagne. She was the star of the night. And the check never came. Nia said, "What happened to it?" Nia shrugged. Maybe the Hendersons changed their minds. Maybe there was a dispute. Or maybe Vivian overstated a casual conversation as a firm commitment. It doesn't matter. The money wasn't there, but Vivian had already announced it. She had already booked the success in the quarterly report. So she lied. "It is worse than a lie," Nia said. "If she retracted the pledge, she would look incompetent. She would lose her chairmanship." So she panicked. She came to me. She asked if Eleanor could make a temporary loan to the fund. To cover the Henderson pledge? Exactly. She wanted Eleanor to wire $50,000 to the fund, just until the Henderson money came in. That way, the audit would show the correct total. And Eleanor refused? Eleanor was furious. Nia said, she told Vivian that she would not be a party to fraud. She told Vivian to resign if she couldn't do the job honestly. I felt a surge of pride for my grandmother. "So what happened?" I asked. "The report lists the Henderson Trust. The book's balanced." Nia pointed to the second line on the photocopy. "Internal transfer. I don't know where she got the money." "Claire, but a week after Eleanor refused, the money appeared in the fund's account. It was deposited as an anonymous donation, but it was used to satisfy the Henderson pledge line item. Vivian kept her chairmanship, and I was fired a month later for failing to align with the organization's vision." I sat back. Vivian had found the $50,000 somewhere else, or she had stolen it. "Nia," I said, "the missing donation, the one you told me about before. The $50,000 that disappeared from Grandma's account." Nia nodded slowly. "The timeline matches. Claire, I think Vivian didn't take no for an answer. I think she found a way to access Eleanor's funds and made the loan herself. She stole from her mother to save her reputation." I whispered. Nia leaned forward. "And now she is suing you. Do you know why? Because she wants the money?" "No," Nia said darkly. "Because if you audit the estate, you will find the whole. You will find that the loan was never paid back, and if you trace that money to the Heritage Fund, Vivian goes to prison for embezzlement and fraud. The anonymous envelope, ask about the gala pledge. Whoever sent this knew. They knew exactly where the bodies were buried. Thank you." "Nia," I said, standing up. "Claire," she said, grabbing my wrist. "Whoever sent this, they are not doing it to help you. They are doing it to hurt Vivian. You are just the weapon they are using. Be careful you don't blow up when you pull the trigger. I needed corroboration. I needed to know how Vivian got access. Eleanor guarded her checkbook like a hawk. I drove to the small, sad apartment complex where my Uncle Ronan lived. It was on the outskirts of town, near the highway. Ronan didn't want to let me in. He stood in the doorway, blocking the view of his messy living room. Go away. Claire, he said. I can't talk to you. Vivian said. I don't care what Vivian said. I interrupted. I pushed past him. Hey! I spun around. I know about the gala pledge. Ronan. Ronan froze. His face went slack. I know she needed $50,000. I said, stepping closer. I know Grandma refused to give it to her, and I know the money disappeared from Grandma's account anyway. Ronan backed up until he hit the back of his sofa. I didn't take it. I swear. I never touched Mom's money. I know you didn't. I said, you don't have the stomach for it, but you were there. Ronan, you saw it happen. Ronan looked at the floor. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Tell me about the document. Ronan, the one you saw Vivian pushing on her. He looked up, his eyes wet. It was supposed to be simple. Vivian said it was just to simplify things. What was? The access. Ronan whispered. She brought a paper over. One evening, she told Mom that the bank was changing its security protocols and that she needed to sign a form to keep her accounts active. She said if Mom didn't sign it, her checks would bounce. She lied to her. I said, disgust rising in my throat. She made it sound urgent. Ronan said, she was so intense. Mom was tired. She had taken her medication. She just wanted Vivian to stop talking. So she signed it. Did you read it? No, but I saw the header. It wasn't a bank form. It said, third-party authorization. I closed my eyes. They had tricked her into signing a limited power of attorney or a specialized banking authorization. That was how they initiated the transfers. That was how they got the assisted access the bank flagged later. Why didn't you stop her? I asked quietly. Ronan sank onto the sofa. Because she's Vivian. You don't stop a hurricane. Claire, you just try not to get hit. I looked at my uncle, a man so beaten down by his sister's force of will that he watched his mother be robbed and said nothing. You are going to have to testify. Ronan, I said, no. He pleaded, please, Claire. She'll cut me off. The trust. It's all I have. If you don't testify, I said, my voice hard, I will tell the judge you were a co-conspirator, and you will lose the trust anyway. I walked out, leaving him with his head in his hands. Thursday morning, the day before the emergency hearing, I met Miles at his office. I laid it all out. The ledger pages, Nia's story, Ronan's confession. Miles listened, his face unreadable. When I finished, he took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief. We have enough to depose Ronan, he said, and the ledger. If we can authenticate it, it connects the theft directly to the Heritage Fund. There is something else, Miles said. He opened his laptop. I did some digging into Ketter and Wren, specifically, Arthur Ketter's partners. He turned the screen toward me. It was a biography page for a man named Julian Wren. Julian Wren, senior partner, specializes in corporate liability and estate planning. And below that, in the list of affiliations, board secretary, Harbor Glen Heritage Fund. I stared at the screen. Vivian's lawyer wasn't just hired gun. His partner was on the board of the charity Vivian was protecting. This is a closed loop, Miles said. Vivian steals the money to fix the fund's books. The fund uses its own legal connections to represent Vivian when the estate is contested. They are not just defending Vivian, they are defending the institution. If I expose the theft, I said, realizing the scale of it, it blows back on the whole board. Exactly, Miles said. That is why they are filing for emergency removal. They need to bury you before you connect these exact dots. They are too late. I said. Miles looked at me seriously. Claire, this makes it dangerous. These are powerful people in Harbor Glen. If you threaten the Heritage Fund, you are threatening the city's elite. I thought about Eleanor. I thought about her fear of being rewritten. I thought about the suited man in the video, Let them come, I said. The courtroom on Friday was suffocating. The air conditioning was broken, and the room was heavy with the smell of damp wool and sweat. Judge Holloway looked irritable. He had a stack of motions in front of him and looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Ms. Wood, the judge said, looking at me, the plaintiff has filed a motion for your immediate removal. They claim you are acting with hostility and failing to perform your fiduciary duties. Miles stood up. Your Honor, the executor has been diligent. She is simply conducting a thorough audit, which is her duty. The hostility is entirely one-sided. Arthur Ketter stood up. He looked smooth, unbothered by the heat. Your Honor, the executor has refused reasonable settlement offers. She has harassed family members. She is dragging this process out to deplete the estate's funds in legal fees. We have a witness, Ronan Wood, who will testify to the toxic environment she has created. I looked at Ronan, sitting in the back row. He looked at his shoes. He wouldn't testify against me. He knew what I knew. Judge Holloway sighed. Mr. Ketter, I am not inclined to remove an executor appointed by the deceased without concrete proof of malfeasance. Being annoying is not grounds for removal. However, the judge continued, I am concerned about the delays. Ms. Wood, why have you not submitted the final inventory? Your Honor, Miles said, we have encountered irregularities. What kind of irregularities? We have discovered a series of attempted wire transfers that were flagged by the bank as fraudulent. Miles said clearly, these attempts occurred prior to the decedent's death, but involved the use of her credentials by a third party. Vivian stiffened in her seat. Ketter interrupted. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. This is a will contest, not a criminal inquiry. It speaks to the pattern of undue influence, Miles countered. If someone was trying to access Eleanor Wood's accounts while she was alive, it suggests the pressure campaign began long before the will was read. Judge Holloway looked interested. He turned to Vivian. Ms. Wood, do you have any knowledge of these flag transfers? Vivian stood up. She looked perfect, as always, but I saw the tremor in her hands. Your Honor, my mother was often confused about her banking. She likely tried to move money and forgot her passwords. To characterize this as fraud is insulting. The judge looked at the paper Miles had submitted. The bank notice. This notice says the access was assisted proxy and that the voice verification failed. That implies someone else was speaking. Vivian's face flushed. Well, she often asked for help. She would ask me or Ronan to help her with the computer. So you admit you were accessing her accounts? The judge asked. No, Vivian snapped. She interrupted herself, her voice rising. I never authorized that transfer. The room went dead silent. I never authorized that transfer. Judge Holloway lowered his glasses. Ms. Wood. The specific transfer in question was not identified by amount or date in the open court discussion just now. How do you know which transfer you didn't authorize? Vivian froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Ketter. Ketter looked like he wanted to strangle her. I assumed. Vivian stammered. You assumed, the judge said, his voice cold. Ketter jumped in. Your Honor, my client is under extreme stress. She is merely speaking generally. Sit down. Ms. Wood, the judge said. He turned to me. The motion to remove the executor is denied. Ms. Wood, you have 30 days to complete your audit, and if you find evidence of fraud, you are to bring it directly to this bench. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. I said. We walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. Vivian was already gone, hustled out a side door by Ketter. Miles pulled me into a quiet alcove. You saw that? He asked. I saw it. She slipped. She knew exactly which transfer we were talking about, Miles said, because she was the one who tried to make it. I pulled the flash drive from my purse. Miles, I said, you need to see the rest of the video. We went to his car. He opened his laptop, and I played the file. We watched Eleanor describe the scene. We watched her describe the suited man. We watched her describe the pressure, and then the camera angle shifted slightly as Eleanor leaned back, revealing a reflection in the window behind her. It was faint, but visible, A man standing in the doorway of the study. Miles hit pause. He zoomed in. The image was blurry, but the man was wearing a distinctive pin on his lapel, a gold circle with a ship inside it. The Heritage Fund lapel pin. Miles whispered. He looked at me, his face pale. Claire, this is admissible. This is a dying declaration regarding a crime in progress. It authenticates the coercion. It authenticates the timeline. If we file this, I said, it destroys her. It destroys all of them. Miles said, Vivian, the lawyer, the board member, this video proves a conspiracy to defraud a vulnerable elder. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered it. Hello? Claire. It was Vivian. Her voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the polished socialite. It wasn't the grieving daughter. It was a raw, jagged whisper. I need to see you, she said. Talk to Miles. I said, no lawyers. Vivian said, please, Claire, I am begging you. Meet me at the Blackwood Cafe. In 20 minutes. Just us. Why should I? Because it is over. She said, I want to end this. Like family. I looked at Miles. He shook his head no. I will meet you. I said, but I'm recording it. The Blackwood Cafe was a neutral ground, a busy coffee shop near the pier, full of tourists and students. I chose a table in the center, visible from all angles. I set my phone on the table, face down, the voice memo app running. Vivian walked in 10 minutes late. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup hastily applied. She wore a trench coat belted tightly at the waist. She sat down. She didn't order coffee. You won, she said. Her voice was flat. I didn't say anything. The judge. He knows. Vivian said, Ketter screamed at me in the car. He said I ruined the strategy. You ruined yourself. Mom. I said, you tried to steal from her. I didn't steal, Vivian hissed, leaning forward. I was borrowing it. It was going to be paid back. Like the Henderson pledge? I asked. Vivian flinched. You know about that? I know everything. I know about the gala. I know about the double counting. I know about the Tuesday wires. Vivian put her head in her hands. She laughed. A broken, sobbing sound. You think you know everything. You think this is just about money, isn't it? No. She looked up, and the fear in her eyes was genuine. It was a primal, animal terror. Claire, listen to me. You have to stop. You have to destroy that video. Why? So you can stay on the board? No, because of what happens if it gets out. She grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. That man, the one in the video. Vivian whispered, do you know who he is? He is a consultant. I said, he is a fixer. Vivian said, he works for the people who actually run this town. The Heritage Fund isn't just a charity. Claire, it is a bank for favors, political favors, real estate deals. She looked around the cafe, terrified. If you put that video into the public record, if you expose the internal workings of the fund, they won't just come after me. She squeezed my hand until it hurt. They will come after you. They will ruin you. They will plant drugs in your car. They will bankrupt your company. They will burn your life down to the ground. You are being paranoid, I said, pulling my hand away. Am I? Vivian asked. Who do you think sent you the ledger pages? Claire? I froze. You think a friend sent those? Vivian shook her head. No, that was a warning shot. That was them telling me that they can reach you. That was them telling me to get you under control. Or they would leak evidence that implicated both of us. Both of us? They will make it look like we were in it together. Vivian said, they will forge your signature. They have done it before. I stared at her. She wasn't bluffing. She truly believed this. If that video gets into court, Vivian whispered, leaning across the table, it won't just ruin me. It'll ruin you too. We are both on the edge of the cliff. Claire, please, for your own sake, let me settle. Let me make this go away. I looked at my mother. For the first time, I saw her not as the villain, but as a victim, a willing victim, maybe, but a victim nonetheless. She had played a game she didn't understand, and now she was trapped. But Eleanor hadn't been trapped. Eleanor had fought back. I stood up. I picked up my phone. I am not settling. Mom, I said, Claire, don't. I am going to finish what Grandma started. I said. I walked out of the cafe. The wind hit me, cold and sharp. Vivian's words echoed in my head. It'll ruin you too. I walked to my car, checking the reflection in the shop windows, checking the parked cars. She was afraid of what Eleanor captured, not just the theft, but the face of the man who represented the machine. I got into my car and locked the doors. I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance anymore. I was holding a grenade, and I had just pulled the pin. The deadline arrived on a Tuesday, carried in on the wings of a storm that battered the windows of the courthouse. Judge Holloway had lost his patience. He issued a scheduling order that was less of a calendar update and more of a threat. All evidentiary materials, including digital assets and witness lists, had to be submitted by 5 p.m. on Friday. It was the endgame. My attorney, Miles Harker, called me within minutes of the filing. They are scrambling. Claire, he said. His voice was tight with adrenaline. Ketter just filed a motion in limine. What does that mean? I asked. I was standing in my kitchen, watching the rain blur the world outside. It means they are trying to suppress evidence before we even submit it. Miles explained. They are arguing that any video recordings made by the deceased are inadmissible hearsay and violate the two-party consent laws. They are throwing everything at the wall. They are citing statutes that do not even apply to probate court. They know. I said, they know what is on the drive. They suspect. Miles corrected. If they knew for sure, they wouldn't be filing motions. They would be offering you a blank check to walk away. But the tone of this filing, it is frantic. The formatting is sloppy. There are typos. Ketter is usually precise. This reads like panic. I looked at the clock on the microwave. I have 48 hours to finalize the submission? You have 48 hours, Miles said. I am preparing the affidavit for the video. We need to authenticate it. We need to prove Eleanor made it of her own volition. I will get it to you. I said. I hung up. The apartment was quiet, but my mind was loud. Vivian was panicking. And when Vivian panicked, she didn't just break things. She tried to rewrite reality. I spent the next 6 hours doing what I should have done weeks ago. I stopped looking at my grandmother's accounts and started looking at the people who stole from them. I pulled up the public filings for the Harbor Glen Heritage Fund. As a registered nonprofit, they were required to file Form 99 OHAs with the IRS. These were public records, though the fund buried them deep on their website under a tab labeled Transparency, which felt like a dark joke. I downloaded the last 3 years of reports. I spread the printouts across my dining table. I was looking for the pattern Nia Serrano had warned me about. The restricted funds in nonprofit accounting. Restricted funds are donations designated for a specific purpose, a scholarship, a building renovation, a specific grant. They are harder to move around than general operating funds. But if you are clever, or if you have a board that looks the other way, you can play games with the definitions. I looked at the filing from 2 years ago. Restricted donation income, $400,000. I looked at the filing from last year, the year Vivian was practically living at Eleanor's house. Caring for her. Restricted donation income, $1,200,000. It was a massive jump. An $800,000 increase in restricted cash flow during the exact period Eleanor's health was failing. I looked closer at the itemization. The increase wasn't from hundreds of small donors. It came from a category labeled Anonymous Donor-Advised Contributions. I circled the line item. The dates aligned perfectly with the missing pages from Eleanor's ledger. They aligned with the loans Nia described. They aligned with the Tuesday wires Ronan had mentioned. Vivian wasn't just covering a $50,000 shortfall for a gala pledge. That was just the tip of the iceberg. She, and the board, were funneling money into the Heritage Fund to prop up its balance sheet, likely to secure loans or grants that required a certain liquidity ratio. They were using the elderly of Harbor Glen as a piggy bank. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just greed. This was systemic predation, and my mother was the extraction team. I waited until nightfall to watch the full video. I needed to be alone. I needed the darkness. I poured a glass of wine that I didn't drink, and I sat in front of my laptop with the blinds drawn. I plugged in the flash drive. I opened the file statement_02_full.mp4. The video player opened. The timestamp was June 11th, 4 in the afternoon. The camera angle was wide, capturing Eleanor's desk and the two leather chairs facing it. Eleanor sat in her high-backed chair. She looked small, frail, but her posture was rigid. The door to the study opened. Vivian walked in. She was wearing a yellow sundress, something bright and cheerful, a costume for a dutiful daughter. She was smiling, but it was the tight, predatory smile I knew too well. Behind her walked a man. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that looked expensive. He had silver hair and the tanned, polished look of a man who spent his life in boardrooms and country clubs. He carried a leather portfolio. I paused the video. I recognized him. It was the man I had seen in the conference room at the Heritage Fund offices, the man who had snapped the blinds shut when he saw me looking. I zoomed in. He wasn't just a consultant. He was Peter Vance. I knew the name from the social pages. He was a real estate developer and the vice president of the Heritage Fund's board. I pressed play. "Mom," Vivian said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "This is Peter. I told you about him. He's helping us sort out the complications with the estate planning." Eleanor didn't smile. "I have an estate plan. Vivian, I have a will." "Of course you do," Peter Vance said. His voice was smooth, baritone, reassuring. "And it is a fine will." "Eleanor, may I call you Eleanor?" "Mrs. Wood?" Eleanor said sharply. Peter didn't blink. "Mrs. Wood, the issue is not the will. The issue is the current liquidity. Vivian tells us you are concerned about the tax implications of your liquid assets. We have a strategy that can insulate you." "I am not concerned about taxes," Eleanor said. "I pay my taxes." Vivian stepped forward, resting a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. Eleanor flinched. "Mom, please," Vivian said. "We are trying to protect you. There are exposures." "Exposures?" Eleanor asked. Peter Vance opened his portfolio. He slid a document across the desk. It was a single page, dense with text. "This is a limited power of attorney," Peter said. "It simply allows Vivian to manage the transfer of specific assets into a protected trust managed by the Heritage Fund. It is temporary. Just to move the funds before the quarter ends." "Why?" Eleanor asked. "Why is there a rush?" "Timelines," Peter said vaguely. "The fiscal year." Eleanor picked up the paper. She put on her reading glasses. She read it slowly. The silence in the room was thick. "This gives her authority over the primary brokerage account." Eleanor said, "It gives her authority to wire funds without my signature." "It is standard," Peter said. "It is theft," Eleanor said. She dropped the paper on the desk. Vivian's face changed. The smile vanished. Her eyes went hard. "Mom, don't be difficult. We need this done today." "Why?" Eleanor asked. She looked directly at Vivian. "Why would I sign away authority while I am alive?" Vivian snapped. She slammed her hand down on the desk. "Because you trust me." "Mom!" The shout echoed in the room. Eleanor looked at her daughter. She didn't flinch. She just looked at her with a profound, crushing sadness. "I used to," Eleanor said quietly. Vivian recoiled, as if she had been slapped. She looked at Peter Vance, panic rising in her eyes. Peter stepped in. He leaned over the desk, invading Eleanor's space. He wasn't smiling anymore. "Mrs. Wood, let us be frank. There are irregularities in your past filings. Vivian has been working very hard to keep your reputation intact. If we cannot secure these funds to balance the accounts, there could be audits, public inquiries." "Are you threatening me?" Eleanor asked. "I am explaining the reality." Peter said cold and flat. "Do you want your legacy to be a tax fraud investigation? Or do you want to be the philanthropist who saved the Heritage Fund?" Eleanor stood up. She was shaky, gripping the edge of the desk. But she stood. Get out of my house, she said. Peter Vance didn't move. I said, get out, Eleanor shouted. Her voice cracked, but it held power. Vivian grabbed Peter's arm. Peter, let's go. She's having an episode. She is not having an episode, Eleanor cried. I see you. Vivian, I see exactly what you are doing. Vivian leaned in, her face inches from Eleanor's. Do you want everyone to know? Vivian hissed. Do you want them to know about Dad? About the money he hid? Eleanor went white. Get out, she whispered. Vivian and Peter Vance turned and walked out. The door slammed. Eleanor stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, her hand over her chest. Then, she looked directly at the camera. She sat down heavily. She adjusted her glasses. I have already amended my will. She told the camera, her voice trembling but clear. I went to Miles Harker 3 days ago. I knew they would come back. She held up 3 fingers. They want the money in the Marlowe and Finch account, the one ending in 459. They tried to tell me I owed it. They tried to tell me I was confused. She leaned forward. If anything happens to me, if my accounts are drained, it was Vivian. And it was that man. She reached out and turned off the camera. The screen went black. I sat in the dark. Tears were streaming down my face. It wasn't just the money, it was the cruelty. Vivian had used my grandfather's memory, some secret about Dad, to blackmail her own mother. She had brought a corporate shark into Eleanor's sanctuary and let him threaten her with audits and ruin. And Eleanor had stood tall. I used to. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard rage. Vivian wasn't just a disappointed heir. She was a monster. But as I wiped my face, I realized something else. In the video, Vivian was terrified. When Eleanor pushed back, Vivian looked at Peter Vance for help. When Peter threatened the audit, Vivian looked sick. Do you want everyone to know? Vivian wasn't driving the bus. Peter Vance was. Vivian was the one with the access, the daughter who could get in the door. But Peter Vance and the Heritage Fund were the ones demanding the cash. Vivian was desperate to get the money not just to live her lavish lifestyle, but because she owed them. She had promised them Eleanor's money. And when she couldn't deliver, they came to collect. They were squeezing her, and now she was squeezing me. I saved the file. I encrypted it. I sent a copy to Miles's secure server. I texted him. I have the video. It names Peter Vance. It proves coercion. File it. Miles replied instantly. Received. We file at 9 a.m. This is the nuclear option. Claire, are you sure? I typed. Burn it down. I went to the kitchen to make tea, just to do something with my hands. The clock on the wall ticked. 11:30 at night. The storm was still raging outside, rain lashing against the glass. There was a knock at the door. It was soft, hesitant. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. The knock came again. Rap, rap, rap. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Vivian. She was standing on the welcome mat, soaked to the bone. She wasn't wearing a trench coat this time. She was wearing a tracksuit and sneakers. Her hair was plastered to her skull. She wasn't holding an umbrella. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. She looked up at me. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black streaks. Her lips were blue. She looked 20 years older than she had at the cafe. Claire, she whispered, what are you doing here? I asked. I didn't step back to let her in. Please, she said. Her teeth chattered. Please, don't file it. How do you know I am filing it? Ketter knows Miles is preparing an affidavit. He knows you found the camera. She reached out, grabbing the doorframe to steady herself. I will sign whatever you want, she said. Her voice was a broken rasp. I will drop the lawsuit. I will sign the statement of capacity. I will walk away from the $6.8 million. You can have it all, every cent. I looked at her. This was total surrender. Why? I asked. Why now? Because of him, Vivian said. Peter Vance? She flinched at the name. Don't say it. Don't say his name. Why? Because if you put his name in a public court filing, if you link him to elder abuse and extortion, Vivian stopped, swallowing hard. They won't just fight you in court, Claire. They will destroy us, both of us. She looked over her shoulder at the dark street. You don't understand how this town works, she said. The Heritage Fund isn't just a charity. It is where the mayor hides his slush fund. It is where the developers wash their bribes. Peter Vance is the gatekeeper. I felt a chill go down my spine. If I expose him, Vivian said, they will make me the monster. They will say I acted alone. They will say I lied to the board. They will hang me out to dry, and they will walk away clean. And then they will come for you. They will find a way to invalidate the will. They will find a way to bankrupt Alderline Metrics. They will ensure you never work in this state again. She fell to her knees on the doormat. Please, Claire, I am begging you. I am your mother. I made mistakes. I was greedy. I was weak. But I don't want to go to prison, and I don't want you to get hurt. I looked down at her. She was pathetic. She was a mess, but she was telling the truth. I could see it in the terror in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of me anymore. She was afraid of them. If I filed the video, I would win the lawsuit. But I would start a war with the most powerful people in the city. A war I might not survive. And Eleanor had said, I am not afraid of dying. I am afraid of being rewritten. If I settled, I could protect Eleanor's legacy. I could keep the money. I could force Vivian out. But Peter Vance would get away with it. I looked at Vivian, shivering on the floor. Get up, I said. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Get up and come inside, I said, before the neighbors see you. She scrambled up and followed me into the kitchen. I threw her a towel. She buried her face in it, shaking uncontrollably. I sat at the table and pulled out a notepad. Here's the deal, I said. Vivian lowered the towel. Anything. 1. You drop the lawsuit with prejudice. You admit the will is valid. You admit Eleanor was of sound mind. Yes, she said. Done. 2. You resign from the board of the Heritage Fund. Immediately. You cite health reasons. You never go near that building again. I can do that. 3. You sign a confession, a private confession. You detail the pressure campaign. You detail the attempted transfers. You name Peter Vance. Vivian's eyes widened. No, I can't write it down. If they find it, you write it, I said, and I keep it. I don't file it with the court. It stays in my safe. But if you ever come near me or the estate again, or if Peter Vance ever looks in my direction, I release it. It is my insurance policy. Vivian stared at me. She saw that I wasn't bluffing. She saw that the quiet daughter was gone. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I looked at her. And the video? She asked. You won't file the video? I won't file it, I said. She let out a sob of relief. Thank you. Oh God, thank you. But I am keeping it, I said. And Vivian. She looked up. If I find out you stole one more dime than I already know about, I will air that video on the 6 o'clock news. I didn't, she said. It was just the $50,000 and the Henderson pledge. I swear, I didn't believe her. But I had what I needed. Sit down, I said. I am calling Miles to draft the stipulation. An hour later, Miles sent the draft. Vivian signed it at my kitchen table. Her hand shaking so badly the pen tore the paper. She left at 2 a.m. She looked like a ghost. She didn't hug me. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked out into the rain, got into her car, and drove away. I locked the door. I leaned against it, exhausted. I had won. The lawsuit was over. The estate was safe. But I felt hollow. I had let the suited man go. I had let the institution off the hook to save my own skin and my mother's freedom. It felt like a compromise Eleanor might have hated. I walked to my bedroom. I opened the closet and knelt by the floor safe. I put the flash drive inside. Next to it sat the second sealed envelope. I hadn't opened it yet. I had found it in the bank box, tucked behind the list of accounts. A smaller, thicker envelope with no writing on it, just a piece of tape securing a small, flat object inside. I picked it up. It felt like a key card or another drive. I held it in my hand. I had won the battle. but the war felt unfinished. Vivian was gone, but Peter Vance was still sitting in his office, counting his restricted funds. I put the envelope back and locked the safe. Tomorrow. I would go to court and watch the judge dismiss the case. Tomorrow. It would be over, or so I thought. The morning the lawsuit ended, the sky over Harbor Glen was a brilliant, deceptive blue. It was the kind of day that made you forget the fog, the damp rot, and the secrets buried under the manicured lawns. I sat in the front row of the probate court, my hands folded in my lap. To my right, Miles Harker was organizing his papers with a calm, methodical efficiency that grated on my nerves. Across the aisle, the defendant's table was empty. Vivian hadn't come. Arthur Ketter sat there alone, looking like a man who had swallowed a lemon whole. All rise, the bailiff announced. Judge Holloway swept in, his robes billowing. He took his seat and looked over his spectacles at the room. "We are here in the matter of the estate of Eleanor Wood," the judge said. "I understand there have been developments?" Arthur Ketter stood up. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Miles. He looked at a spot on the wall above the judge's head. "Your Honor," he said, his voice devoid of its usual bluster. "The petitioner, Vivian Wood, moves to voluntarily dismiss her claims with prejudice." A ripple of whispers went through the gallery. With prejudice, that meant it was over. She couldn't refile. She couldn't change her mind. It was a total surrender. Ketter continued. "Furthermore, we are submitting a sworn affidavit from Ms. Wood affirming that, to the best of her knowledge, the decedent, Eleanor Wood, was of sound mind and full testamentary capacity at the time the will was executed." The judge raised an eyebrow. "That is quite a reversal. Mr. Ketter, last week you were arguing Miss Wood was hallucinating. My client has reevaluated her position based on new information," Ketter said tightly. The judge looked at Miles. "Mr. Harker, does the estate accept this dismissal?" "We do, Your Honor," Miles said. "Then it is so ordered," the judge said. "The contest is dismissed. The will stands. The temporary freeze on assets is lifted. Miss Claire Wood is confirmed as executor with full authority." He banged the gavel. It was a sharp, wooden crack that signaled the end of the war. But it didn't feel like a victory. As I walked out of the courtroom, dodging the few local reporters who had shown up hoping for a family brawl, I felt a heavy, hollow ache in my chest. I had won. I had the $6.8 million. I had the house. I had the vindication. But I had lost my mother. And I had let a predator walk away in a charcoal suit. That afternoon, I sat in my office at Alderline Metrics, staring at a spreadsheet I couldn't focus on. My coworkers walked by on tiptoes, offering awkward smiles. They knew I had won. The news was already on the blog, but they didn't know what to say. "Congratulations on your mom not suing you anymore." My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Claire." It was Vivian. Her voice sounded thin, tinny, as if she were calling from inside a tunnel. "Vivian," I said. "Where are you?" "I am leaving," she said. "I'm on the highway. I'm going to stay with Aunt Sarah in Vermont for a while." "Vermont? That's 6 hours away. I can't stay here." "Claire, not after last night." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the hum of tires on asphalt. "I'm sorry," she said finally. I closed my eyes. "Sorry for what? For stealing? For lying? For trying to gaslight me?" "I'm sorry you had to see me like that," she said. "Like what? Desperate? Like a cornered animal?" She wasn't apologizing for the act. She was apologizing for the loss of dignity. She was apologizing for the mask slipping. "Vivian," I said, "what about the others? What about Peter Vance?" "He won't bother you," she said quickly. "He knows you have the insurance. He knows the cost of doing business. Just stay away from them. Claire, take the money and live your life. Don't dig." She hung up. I stared at the phone. Don't dig. It was the worst advice she could have given me. I left work early and drove to Eleanor's house. It was mine now. Officially. I walked through the rooms, the silence heavy and expectant. The dust motes danced in the late afternoon sun. I went to the study. I sat in her chair. I opened my purse and took out the second sealed envelope. The one I had found in the safe deposit box, tucked behind the list of accounts. I had been afraid to open it, afraid it would be another instruction, another burden. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored stationery and a small silver key taped to the bottom. My dearest Claire, if you are reading this, then the first battle is over. You have faced the storm, and you are still standing. I knew you would be. You are likely wondering about the size of the estate. $6.8 million is a great deal of money, but it is not all of it. I stopped reading. My heart skipped a beat. I kept the main estate simple intentionally. I knew that a large liquid pot of money would act as a lure. It would draw out anyone who was acting in bad faith. It would test the loyalties of those around me. And sadly, I suspected it would reveal the character of your mother. If you have reached this point, and if you have successfully defended my capacity without succumbing to their pressure, then you have proven yourself worthy of the rest. The key below opens the false drawer behind the molding of the bookshelf to your left. Inside, you will find the incorporation documents for the Prometheus Trust. This is a separate entity I established 5 years ago. It is funded by the sale of the land in the valley, a transaction I kept private. The trust is endowed with $12 million, dedicated to funding legal aid for the elderly and scholarships for students from Harbor Glen who have been disenfranchised by the very institutions that run this town. However, the trust only activates if the executor, you, can certify that no family member used coercion or fraud to access my accounts during my lifetime. If coercion occurred, the trust dissolves and the funds are donated to a national charity. Bypassing Harbor Glen entirely, the choice is yours, Claire. You can expose the truth and fund the fight for others, or you can bury the secrets and let the money leave our home. Choose wisely. Love, Grandma. I sat there, stunned. She had played them. She had played all of us. The $6.8 million was just the bait. The real legacy, the Prometheus Trust, was hidden, waiting for a champion who wasn't afraid to burn bridges. $12 million. And the condition? Certify that no family member used coercion. I couldn't certify that. Vivian had used coercion, unless I exposed it, unless I made it public. If I exposed the coercion, I could argue that I had cleansed the estate. But if I hid it, if I stuck to the deal I made with Vivian, then the coercion remained a secret, rotting the foundation of the trust. I picked up the small silver key. I walked to the bookshelf. I felt along the molding on the left side. There was a slight groove. I inserted the key. Click. A small section of the molding popped open, revealing a hidden drawer. Inside was a thick stack of papers, the trust documents, and on top of them, a backup copy of the video flash drive and a handwritten list. It was a list of names: Peter Vance, Julian Wren, Mayor Sterling, Vivian Wood, and next to Peter Vance's name, she had written, the architect, and next to Vivian's name, the key. I realized then what Eleanor had done. She hadn't just recorded a video. She had built a trap. She knew they were coming for her. She knew they were using Vivian to get to her. So she created a scenario where they would have to show their faces. Vivian was the key they used to unlock the door, but Peter Vance was the architect who built the maze. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the court clerk, an automated update on the case file. New filing, emergency petition for access to sealed evidence. I frowned. The case was closed, dismissed with prejudice. I opened the email on my phone. Petitioner. The Harbor Glen Heritage Fund, acting as interested third party. Representation. The law offices of Julian Wren. Summary. The petitioner asserts that the deceased, Eleanor Wood, made verbal promises of a restricted donation in the amount of $200,000. The petitioner seeks access to all video evidence and sealed materials to determine if these promises were memorialized. My blood ran cold. They weren't stopping. Vivian had left town. She was no longer their shield. She was no longer useful to them. So now, they were coming for the evidence themselves. They wanted the video, not to prove a donation, but to destroy it, to bury it before I could use it. They knew Vivian had crumbled. They knew I had the drive, and they were using the legal system to force me to hand it over. Julian Wren, Arthur Ketter's partner, the board secretary, they were moving to contain the fallout. I looked at the backup drive in the drawer. I looked at the list of names. If I gave them the video, they would destroy it. They would claim it was inadmissible or confused, or they would just lose it in the chain of custody. If I fought them, they would ruin me. Vivian had said it. They will burn your life down. But Eleanor had given me $12 million to fight back. I picked up the backup drive. I slipped it into my pocket. I walked out of the study, through the silent house, and out onto the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. Vivian was gone. She was the convenient villain, the greedy daughter, the easy target, but she was just the symptom. The disease was the Heritage Fund. The disease was Peter Vance and Julian Wren, and the system that preyed on widows to balance their books. If I let Vivian take the fall and walked away, the machine would keep grinding. They would find another elderly woman, another desperate relative, another shortfall to cover. I looked at the ocean churning below the cliffs. I took out my phone and called Miles. "Claire?" He answered. "I just saw the filing. They are persistent." "Miles," I said, "do we still have the affidavit ready? The one for the video?" "Yes, but the case is dismissed. We don't need to file it." "We do." I said. "Why?" "Because I am not just the executor of the estate. Miles, I am the trustee of the Prometheus Trust." "Prometheus?" Miles asked. "What is that?" "It is the fire," I said. I looked at the key in my hand. "Miles, file the video, file the affidavit, and file a cross-petition against the Heritage Fund for civil conspiracy and elder abuse. Claire, are you sure? This is war." "I know." I said, "But Grandma didn't leave me a fortune to be safe. She left me a fortune to be dangerous." I hung up. I stood on the porch, feeling the wind whip my hair across my face. Vivian had run away. She had chosen safety. I chose the truth. I turned and walked back into the house, locking the door behind me. The fog was rolling in, but inside, the lights were on, and on the desk, the list of names waited for me: the architect, the key, and now, the executioner. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey through the secrets of Harbor Glen. If you are listening, I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this revenge story and want to hear more tales of family drama, betrayal, and justice, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Claire made the right choice by exposing the Heritage Fund, even though it puts her at risk? Or should she have taken the money and run? Let me know in the comments in English. Until next time.